The outpost on Proxima II was eerily quiet, as if the universe itself held its breath. Captain Ethan Cole stood on the observation deck, staring at the enormous alien vessel that had descended onto human soil just hours ago. It gleamed under the artificial light of the colony's dome, its dark metallic hull marked with glowing symbols that pulsed faintly. It wasn't the first time humanity had seen a Generi ship, but it was the first time one had landed peacefully. Ethan's fingers tapped against the console beside him as his sharp blue eyes scanned the ship. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself. The Generi were known for their brutal conquests, not for diplomatic visits. And yet, here they were, requesting a meeting under a flag of truce. "Captain," a voice crackled over his comms. It was Lieutenant Harris, his second in command. "They're stepping out of the ship now. You'll want to see this." Ethan adjusted his uniform and made his way to the landing bay. As the heavy doors hissed open, he was greeted by a sight he hadn't expected. Descending the ramp was not a Generi warlord or a battalion of soldiers. Instead, it was a lone woman, her regal posture unmistakable. She was tall, her silvery skin shimmering like moonlight, and her piercing violet eyes scanned the room with a mix of caution and determination. Behind her walked a small child, no older than 6, clutching the woman's hand. The air in the bay grew tense as every human soldier and scientist froze, their gazes fixed on the unexpected visitors. The woman stepped forward, her long, flowing cloak trailing behind her. She raised her hand slowly, a universal gesture of peace. "I am Princess Lyria of the Generi Empire," she announced, her voice melodic but firm. "I come not as a conqueror, but as a mother seeking refuge." Ethan stepped forward, his boots clicking against the metallic floor. "Refuge? From your own empire?" Lyria nodded solemnly. "The Generi Empire is not as united as it appears. My brother, Kanar, has seized power and declared war on anyone loyal to me. My daughter and I are no longer safe among my own people." Ethan's brow furrowed. The idea of internal conflict within the Generi was almost impossible to imagine. They had always seemed like an unstoppable force, their unity a key to their dominance. "And why come here?" Ethan asked, his tone cautious but curious. "Why Earth? Why me?" Lyria's gaze met his, and for a moment, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Because humanity is unlike any other species we've encountered. You are resourceful, resilient, and driven by principles. If anyone can protect us, it is you." Ethan crossed his arms. "You expect us to trust you just like that? Your people have attacked countless worlds, including our own colonies. You think a few words will erase that history?" Lyria took a step closer, her expression unwavering. "I do not ask for forgiveness. I ask for a chance. In return, I offer something that no other Generi would dare to give. A way to defeat my brother and dismantle his reign of terror. But to do that, I need your help." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And what exactly are you offering?" Her response was as shocking as her arrival. "Take me as your concubine. Make me part of your household, under your protection. It is the only way to ensure my survival and my daughter's." The room erupted in murmurs, the humans present exchanging bewildered looks. Ethan held up a hand, silencing the chatter. His mind raced. This wasn't just an unusual request. It was a potential political nightmare. Accepting her could provoke the Generi Empire, risking humanity's fragile position in the galaxy. Refusing her could mean losing a valuable opportunity to learn about their greatest enemy. Before he could respond, Lyria knelt before him, a gesture of submission that no Generi had ever shown a human. "I will do whatever it takes to protect my daughter," she said softly, "even if it means humbling myself before you." Ethan stared at her, unsure whether to feel pity, suspicion, or respect. The child, standing quietly by her side, looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes that seemed to mirror her mother's plea. "Stand up," he said finally, his voice firm but not unkind. "We don't take kneeling lightly here." Lyria rose gracefully, her expression unreadable. "Let's talk," Ethan said, gesturing toward the nearby conference room. "But understand this, if you want our help, you'll have to prove your loyalty first." As they walked toward the room, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was the beginning of something far larger than any of them realized. Ethan sat at the head of the conference table, his gaze steady on the alien princess before him. Lyria, even under the harsh glow of the overhead lights, carried an air of grace that was hard to ignore. Her daughter, Lyra, sat quietly beside her, wide-eyed but calm. The child's small hands clutched the edge of her mother's flowing cloak like a lifeline. "So," Ethan began, his voice even but probing, "you come here, asking for refuge, and offer yourself in exchange for information. I think we deserve to know the full story." Lyria nodded, folding her hands neatly on the table. Her violet eyes, sharp yet weary, met his. "You're right. You deserve the truth." She took a breath, her tone steady but edged with pain. "The Generi Empire, you know, is not as unified as it seems. On the surface, we are conquerors, but within, our politics are a web of ambition and betrayal." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Sounds familiar. Continue." She hesitated, her gaze flickering to her daughter before returning to Ethan. "My father, Emperor Canary, ruled with a vision of expansion and order. But his strength was also his weakness. When he died unexpectedly, my brother, Canar, seized power. He saw our people not as an empire, but as his tool for domination. And you opposed him," Ethan guessed. "Not at first," Lyria admitted, her voice quieter now. "I believed in unity, even under his rule. But Canar's methods grew more brutal. He began purging anyone who questioned him. And soon, his sights turned to me. I was a threat, not because of my ambition, but because of my bloodline. The people remember my father, and they see me as his true heir." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "And what about the child?" Lyria's face softened as she glanced at Lyra. "My daughter is innocent, but to Canar, she is a symbol of rebellion. He will not rest until she is gone." Lyra looked up at her mother, as if sensing the weight of her words. Ethan felt a pang of unease. The child didn't belong in the middle of such a dangerous game, but here she was, caught in the storm of her family's conflict. "And why Earth?" Ethan asked, steering the conversation back to the point. "Why not seek help from another Generi faction?" Lyria straightened, her voice firm. "Because no Generi faction would defy Canar for me. They fear him too much. But humans..." She paused, her expression thoughtful. "Humans are different. Your species values freedom, defiance, and hope. You've faced threats stronger than you and found ways to overcome them. That is why I came to you." Ethan's brow furrowed. "You're putting a lot of faith in us. We're not exactly in the best position to challenge an empire." Lyria tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Perhaps not alone. But with the right information, the right strategy, you could do more than just survive. You could change the balance of power in the galaxy." The room fell silent. Ethan glanced at his officers, who had been quietly observing the exchange. He could see the skepticism in their eyes, the unspoken questions. Was she telling the truth? Could she be trusted? "What's the catch?" Ethan finally asked. "You've got to have some other angle here." Lyria met his gaze without flinching. "The catch is that my survival and my daughter's depend entirely on your decision. If you refuse me, I will not survive long enough to see Canar's downfall. If you accept me, you will gain an ally who knows his weaknesses better than anyone." Ethan folded his arms, weighing her words. It was a gamble, no doubt about it. Taking her in could provoke Canar's wrath and put Earth in even greater danger. But the alternative was to let an opportunity slip away, a chance to learn about the Generi from the inside. Lyra shifted in her seat, drawing Ethan's attention. The girl's eyes, so much like her mother's, locked on his. There was no fear in them, only a quiet determination that seemed far too mature for her age. Finally, Ethan spoke. You're asking for a lot of trust, Princess. Trust isn't something we give freely, especially not to someone from a species that's caused us so much pain. Lyria inclined her head slightly. Then let me earn it. Keep me here as your prisoner, if you must. Interrogate me, test my loyalty. Do whatever it takes. But I swear to you, Captain, I will prove that my intentions are genuine. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. This isn't just my decision. I'll need to talk to my superiors. Until then, you and your daughter will be confined to the guest quarters. Under guard. Lyria nodded. That is fair. As the meeting concluded, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the fate of more than just 2 lives rested on his decision. The stakes were higher than ever, and the weight of it all pressed heavily on his shoulders. The metallic doors of the guest quarters hissed shut, locking Lyria and her daughter, Lyra, inside. 2 armed guards stood at attention outside, their expressions unreadable. Inside the room, Lyria moved gracefully, inspecting her surroundings. The quarters were modest but clean, a stark contrast to the grand halls of the Generi palace she once called home. Lyra sat quietly on the edge of the small cot, her wide violet eyes scanning every detail. "Mama, are we safe here?" she asked in a soft, trembling voice. Lyria knelt in front of her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her cheek. "For now, my child, but we must tread carefully. These humans are not like us. They do not trust easily, and they have every reason to doubt me." Lyra nodded solemnly, her small fingers clutching the edge of her mother's cloak. "I will be brave, Mama." A faint smile touched Lyria's lips. "I know you will." Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the command center with his officers. A holographic display floated before them, showing real-time scans of the Generi vessel parked on the landing pad. "This could be a trap," Lieutenant Harris said, his tone sharp. "We're dealing with a member of a species that's nearly wiped out 2 of our colonies. How do we know she isn't just softening us up for an invasion?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. "We don't know, but she handed herself over willingly. If this is a trick, it's a desperate one." Dr. Elena Vargas, the chief scientist, spoke up. Her story about internal conflict within the Generi is plausible. Empires that large are rarely as stable as they seem. And if she's telling the truth, this could be an opportunity to learn about their technology, their culture, even their weaknesses. Or it could get us all killed, Harris muttered. Ethan sighed, standing and pacing the room. "Look, I don't trust her either. But if there's even a chance she's telling the truth, we need to explore it. We're at a disadvantage in this galaxy. We can't afford to ignore an opportunity like this." The officers exchanged uneasy glances but nodded in agreement. Later that day, Ethan visited the guest quarters. The guard stepped aside as he entered, the door sliding shut behind him. Lyria stood by the window, gazing out at the vast expanse of stars visible through the dome. Lyra sat nearby, her attention focused on a small holographic device that emitted soft, glowing lights. "Captain Cole," Lyria greeted, turning to face him. Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of tension in her posture. "Princess," Ethan replied, keeping his tone neutral. His gaze shifted to the child. "How's she holding up?" "She is strong," Lyria said, a touch of pride in her voice. "Stronger than she should have to be." Ethan nodded, his expression softening slightly. He gestured toward the small table in the corner of the room. "Mind if we talk?" Lyria inclined her head and took a seat, her movements elegant and controlled. Ethan sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "I've decided to let you stay," he began, "but under strict conditions. You'll be confined to these quarters for now. No access to sensitive areas, no communication with anyone outside this base, and you'll be under constant surveillance." Lyria's expression remained calm. "I expected no less." "Your caution is wise." Ethan studied her for a moment before continuing. "I need you to prove you're not here to trick us. Start by giving me something useful. Intel, technology, anything that shows you're serious about this alliance." Lyria's eyes glinted with determination. Very well. I will give you the schematics for one of our smaller vessels, its propulsion system, weapons, and defensive capabilities. It is older technology, but it will give you an edge in understanding how we operate. Ethan's eyebrows lifted slightly. If she was telling the truth, that information could be invaluable. Why would you give us that? Because I need you to trust me, Lyria said simply, and because I know my brother would never imagine a human using our technology effectively. He underestimates your kind. I do not. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her closely. He couldn't tell if her confidence was genuine or calculated, but her offer was too tempting to ignore. All right, he said finally. We'll analyze the schematics. If they check out, we'll consider your next move. Lyria nodded, her gaze unwavering. Thank you, Captain. I will not disappoint you. As Ethan rose to leave, Lyra looked up from her holographic device. Are you the leader here? She asked, her voice small but curious. Ethan paused, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Something like that. Lyra tilted her head, studying him intently. You don't look like a leader. You look kind. Ethan chuckled softly. Kindness and leadership aren't always opposites, kid. As he left the room, Ethan couldn't shake the strange sense that he was at the center of something much bigger than himself. The princess was right about one thing. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was the start of something that could change humanity's place in the galaxy. The following week was tense as the humans began analyzing the Generi schematics Lyria had provided. The technology, though advanced, was not as alien as they had feared. The propulsion system could be reverse engineered, and the weapons systems offered a wealth of knowledge. But there was one problem. Every time they tried to reach out for more information, they hit a wall. Lyria had kept her word. She had shared what she could, but it wasn't enough. Ethan knew that for this alliance to mean anything, he would need more than just a few blueprints. He needed her cooperation, her full trust. The tension in the base grew as rumors circulated. Some soldiers were growing impatient, questioning the wisdom of keeping a Generi princess on Earth. Others, especially the higher-ranking officials, were starting to see potential in Lyria's offer. Still, every step forward was balanced by a deep sense of uncertainty. One morning, just as the sun began to rise over Proxima II, Ethan received an unexpected message. The screen in his office flashed with an urgent warning from the surveillance team. Captain, you need to see this, Lieutenant Harris said over the comms, his voice tight with concern. Ethan's stomach tightened as he stood and moved toward the command center. He had a sinking feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. When he entered the room, the main monitor displayed a series of encrypted transmissions from the Generi ship. At first glance, it seemed like nothing unusual, just routine communication. But one signal stood out. It was from the Generi Empire, addressed to the ship Lyria had arrived on. The message was clear and chilling. Princess Lyria is a traitor. Bring her back alive. Do not let her escape. Execute all who stand in your way. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The message confirmed his worst fear. Lyria was not just a fugitive. She was a target, and her enemies weren't going to let her slip away easily. We need to move fast, Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. Prepare for a possible attack. I want extra security around her quarters, and keep a close watch on the Generi ship. They may try something. Lieutenant Harris nodded. Understood, sir. The tension inside the base ratcheted up instantly. Soldiers moved with purpose, reinforcing security and locking down critical areas. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the Generi were already moving. They wouldn't risk waiting long to retrieve their traitor. As the preparations unfolded, Ethan found himself standing in front of Lyria's quarters once more. His mind raced with the implications of the encrypted message. If Kanor's forces were coming, things would escalate quickly. There was no way to know how much time they had left. When the door slid open, he found Lyria standing by the window again, gazing at the distant stars. Her posture was regal, but Ethan could see the wariness in her eyes. "Lyria," he said, his voice steady but serious. "I've just intercepted a message from your empire. They know where you are." She didn't turn around immediately. Instead, she continued to look out at the stars, as if she were preparing herself for something inevitable. Finally, she spoke. "I knew they would come for me eventually." Ethan's stomach churned. He had hoped that maybe the Generi Empire would leave her alone, but the reality was clear now. Lyria was running out of time. "You're going to have to tell me everything," he said firmly. "How much of this were you hiding from us?" Lyria turned to face him, her expression soft but serious. "Everything I've told you is the truth, Captain. Canar's forces are relentless. If they find me, they will stop at nothing to destroy me and my daughter. But if you help me now, you'll not only save us, you'll gain a powerful ally in the galaxy. I swear to you, I will do everything I can to help your people as well." Ethan didn't doubt her sincerity, but there was still something unsettling about the entire situation. "Why didn't you tell me about the message?" "I didn't want to risk panic," Lyria replied. "The Generi will come for me whether or not you know. I thought it best to keep you focused on the immediate task. But now you know the truth. The clock is ticking." Ethan's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. He needed to think fast. "We can't fight an entire empire, Lyria. But we can fight smart. We'll need to outthink them, stay one step ahead. I'll organize an extraction plan, but you'll need to trust me." Lyria nodded, a quiet understanding in her gaze. "I trust you more than you know." Suddenly, the lights in the hall flickered, and the base went on full alert. A low hum filled the air, the sound of an incoming vessel, far too large to be just a scout ship. "They're here," Ethan said, his voice cold with determination. "Everyone to your positions. Get Lyria and her daughter to safety." Lyria's face tightened with fear, but she stood tall, her hands gripping her daughter's shoulders. "I will fight for my survival. If I must face my brother's soldiers, I will do so with honor." Ethan nodded, signaling the security teams to move into action. "Let's make sure it doesn't come to that." The fate of both their people rested on the coming battle. Ethan knew that the next few hours would determine the future, not just for Lyria and her daughter, but for humanity itself. The base was in full lockdown. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors, and the hum of distant engines grew louder as the Generi vessel descended toward the landing zone. Ethan stood in the command center, his mind racing through possibilities. The enemy was coming, and there was no way to avoid a confrontation. He had to make sure his people were ready. "Lieutenant Harris, status report," Ethan ordered. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "Shields are up, sir. Security teams are in position," Harris replied, his eyes flicking between several screens. "We've got at least 24 Generi soldiers coming in hot. They're not here for a peaceful talk." "Understood," Ethan said. He glanced at the small team of officers around him, each preparing for the worst. He couldn't afford any mistakes. This wasn't just about protecting Lyria. It was about protecting Earth from the might of the Generi Empire. As the ground trembled slightly beneath them, indicating the Generi ship's landing, Ethan turned to one of his senior officers. "Get Princess Lyria and her daughter to the safe zone. Now." "Right away, Captain," the officer replied, rushing off to execute the order. Lyria stood in her quarters, her expression calm but focused. She had expected this moment for weeks, but knowing it was coming didn't make it any easier. Her daughter, Lyra, was sitting on the bed, holding her favorite stuffed animal tightly in her small hands. She was scared, and though she tried to hide it, Lyria could see it in her eyes. "Listen to me, Lyria said gently, kneeling beside her daughter. "We are going to be okay. The humans are going to help us, but we must stay strong. Do you understand?" Lyra nodded, though her lip quivered slightly. "But what if they find us, Mama?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll be safe, my love. We have to believe that," Lyria reassured her. She kissed her daughter's forehead and stood, straightening her shoulders. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a mother fighting to protect her child, and she wasn't going to let anyone take Lyra from her. The door to their quarters opened, and one of the security officers appeared. "Your Highness, it's time." Lyra nodded. "Let's go." As they moved through the halls of the base, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Soldiers were moving in every direction, preparing for what could be a full-scale assault. Lyra kept her head held high, though her heart beat faster with each step. They'd reached the safe room, a heavily fortified area deep within the base. Lyra was escorted inside, and the door slammed shut behind her, sealing her and her daughter in for the time being. "Stay here, Your Highness. We'll keep you safe," the officer said before turning to leave. Lyra nodded, though a feeling of unease gnawed at her. She knew her enemies weren't far behind, and the walls of this room wouldn't keep them safe forever. Back in the command center, Ethan's mind raced as he watched the incoming ships on his radar. The Generi forces were approaching fast. There was no time to waste. "Bring up the tactical map," Ethan said. Harris immediately tapped a few keys, and a three-dimensional map of the base appeared on the screen. Several red dots blinked on the map, representing the Generi soldiers moving toward the main building. "We need to hold them off long enough for Lyra and her daughter to escape," Ethan said. He looked at his officers. "Prepare the ground forces. We're not letting them through." The room erupted into action as the officers moved to execute their orders. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline as he made his way to the weapons control room. It was time for a fight. The first wave of Generi soldiers arrived, their armored boots echoing through the hallway. Ethan and his team had set up defenses at key points, hoping to slow the enemy down long enough to buy time. Gunfire rang out as the soldiers clashed. Ethan's team held their ground, but the Generi were relentless. Their superior technology and strength made them formidable opponents. But the humans had something the Generi didn't: determination. Ethan ducked behind a barricade as a blast from a Generi plasma rifle scorched the air above him. "Return fire," he shouted, signaling for his team to push back. One of the soldiers, Private Turner, threw a grenade into the hallway, and there was a deafening explosion. The blast sent Generi soldiers flying, but more kept coming. "Sir," Lieutenant Harris called over the comms, "they're breaking through at the south entrance. We need to fall back." "No," Ethan replied sharply. "We hold them here. We can't let them get any closer." The ground shook as the Generi began deploying heavier artillery, and the battle quickly turned into a full-scale conflict. Ethan's heart pounded as he barked orders, trying to keep his team together. Despite the overwhelming odds, the humans were fighting with everything they had. They weren't just protecting their base. They were protecting their home, their future. And for the first time, Ethan felt that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance against the might of the Generi Empire. Back in the safe room, Lyra could hear the sounds of the battle raging just beyond the walls. Her heart pounded in her chest as she held Lyra close. "Don't worry, Mama," Lyra whispered, her voice full of a strength Lyra had not expected. "We'll be okay." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. She wasn't going to let her daughter see her fear. She had to stay strong, for Lyra's sake, and for the future of their people. She had come to Earth for refuge, but now she realized something else. This wasn't just about saving herself. This was about proving to the galaxy that humanity had the courage to stand up to any force, no matter how powerful. And Lyra would stand with them, no matter what. The battle raged on outside the safe room as the Generi forces continued to press forward. The sounds of gunfire, explosions, and shouting echoed through the halls of the base, filling the air with tension. Inside the reinforced room, Lyra held her daughter close, her mind torn between fear for their safety and the hope that the humans would hold their ground. "Stay with me, Lyra," she whispered softly, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Everything will be all right." Lyra, despite her young age, showed remarkable strength. Her wide violet eyes shone with a quiet resolve. "I know, Mama. I believe in them." They won't let us down. Lyria gave her daughter a reassuring smile, though inside, her heart was heavy. She had seen what the Generi could do. Canar's forces were not just soldiers. They were relentless and merciless. If they found her, they would stop at nothing to bring her back, dead or alive. But she refused to let that happen. Not while Lyra was with her. Across the base, Ethan was leading his team through the chaos. The fight had escalated, and the Generi were closing in on their position. His soldiers fought with a bravery that even he hadn't expected. Despite their disadvantage, they were making the Generi pay for every inch of ground they gained. "We've got them on the ropes," Lieutenant Harris said, his voice gruff but hopeful as he crouched beside Ethan. "They're losing ground, sir." Ethan nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "Good. We can't afford to let up now. We need to buy time for Lyria and her daughter to escape. If we can hold them here just a little longer, we might have a chance." The battle outside was intense, but Ethan could feel a shift. The humans were fighting not just for survival, but for something greater, a chance to prove their worth in a galaxy full of powerful and ancient civilizations. "Captain," Private Turner called from across the room. "The Generi have deployed a larger force from the south. They're overwhelming us." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. They couldn't afford to be surrounded, not with Lyria and her daughter still in the base. "We need reinforcements," Ethan said urgently. "All units, fall back to the secondary perimeter. We'll set up a last stand if we have to." As his soldiers fell back, the Generi forces advanced, their cold, unfeeling tactics pushing them forward with machine-like precision. The humans had fought valiantly, but Ethan knew they couldn't hold out forever. Meanwhile, Lyria was pacing nervously inside the safe room, her ears straining to hear any sign of what was happening outside. Her hand instinctively moved to the communication device attached to her belt. She had to know. Taking a deep breath, she activated the device. "Captain Cole," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What is the status of the battle?" There was a brief pause before Ethan's voice crackled over the comm. "We're holding them off, Princess, but they're pushing hard. We need to get you and your daughter out of here as soon as possible. The base won't last much longer." Lyria's pulse quickened. "And the Generi, will they give up?" "I doubt it," Ethan replied grimly. "They're coming for you, and they won't stop until they get what they want. But don't worry. We're working on an escape plan." Lyria closed her eyes, taking a moment to steady herself. She had always been a warrior, but now, with her daughter's life in her hands, she felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. She had no choice but to trust the humans. She had no choice but to trust Ethan. "Take care of her," Lyria whispered, her voice barely audible. "I will," Ethan responded, his voice filled with determination. "Stay strong, Princess." Lyria turned to her daughter, her gaze filled with love and sadness. "Lyra, listen to me. We need to be brave, my dear. The humans are doing everything they can to protect us, but we must go when the time comes. We cannot let fear control us." Lyra nodded silently, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the walls of the safe room. Lyria's heart raced. The Generi had breached the outer perimeter. It was only a matter of time before they found their way to the safe room. A voice crackled over the comm once more. "Princess, we've got an opening. Head to the east exit. We've cleared a path for you." Lyria didn't hesitate. "Let's go, Lyra," she said urgently, scooping her daughter into her arms. The two of them moved quickly through the halls, the sounds of battle still echoing in the distance. Lyria's mind raced, calculating every step, every risk. She knew they didn't have much time. If the Generi closed in on them, there would be no escape. When they reached the east exit, a small team of soldiers was waiting for them, guns drawn and ready. "This way, Your Highness," one of them said, gesturing toward a nearby transport ship. Lyria nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. But just as they were about to board, a loud voice shouted from behind them. "Stop!" Lyria froze, her blood running cold. She turned to see a Generi soldier, his dark armor glinting in the dim light. He raised his weapon, and for a moment, it seemed like the world had slowed to a crawl. But before the soldier could fire, a shot rang out from the distance, knocking the Generi soldier off his feet. Ethan appeared, his face determined and focused. "Get on the ship now." Lyria didn't need to be told twice. With one final glance at Ethan, she rushed into the transport ship, holding Lyra close. The hatch slammed shut behind them, and the ship's engines roared to life, lifting off from the base. As they ascended into the sky, Lyria looked out the window at the battle below. The humans had done it. They had held their ground long enough for her and her daughter to escape, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, Lyria felt a glimmer of hope. The transport ship sped through the atmosphere, leaving the burning wreckage of the base behind. Lyria sat in the back, her daughter in her arms, eyes wide with awe as the stars glittered outside the small viewport. She had just escaped the Generi Empire's wrath, and yet there was no relief. The battle wasn't over. Ethan's voice crackled through the comms, reaching her even in the quiet of the ship. "Princess, we've cleared the area. The Generi are retreating for now, but we can't let our guard down. They will come after you again. We need to get you somewhere safe." Lyria's heart fluttered with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She hadn't expected to escape so quickly, but now they were in the sky, heading toward an unknown future. She wasn't entirely sure where she was headed next, but she knew one thing: the humans had done everything they could to protect her and her daughter. They had earned her trust. "We're heading to one of our safe houses," Ethan continued. "It's a long shot, but it's the best we can do for now. We'll keep you hidden until we have a better plan." Lyria looked down at Lyra, who was still holding tightly onto her mother's hand. Her daughter's calm expression comforted her, even as the weight of everything they had been through pressed heavily on her shoulders. "Lyra, we're going to be okay," she whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from her daughter's face. Lyra looked up at her with a quiet smile. "I know, Mama. I trust you." Lyria felt a wave of pride wash over her. Her daughter, at such a young age, had shown strength beyond her years. It was a reminder of why she fought, why she was willing to risk everything for a chance at freedom. As the ship flew farther from the conflict below, Lyria thought back to her people, to the life she had left behind on the Generi world. She had been a princess once, surrounded by power, luxury, and the expectations of her station. But all of that had changed when she defied her brother Canar. Canar had once been her ally, her protector, but he had become something darker, a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his control over the Generi Empire. She had seen the cruelty in his eyes, the way he treated those who dared to oppose him. But no more. Lyria had made the hardest decision of her life when she fled with her daughter, and though she feared what the future held, she knew it was the right choice. No matter what happened next, she would never go back to the empire that had forsaken her. "Princess, we're approaching the safe house." Ethan's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Prepare for landing." Lyria nodded, though her heart was still racing. She knew the Generi would not give up easily. Their forces might have retreated for now, but they would be back. And this time, they would come with more strength, more fury. When the ship landed, Ethan was waiting for them, along with a small team of soldiers. The safe house was hidden deep in the mountains, far from the eyes of anyone who might want to find them. The walls were thick, built to withstand attacks from both the air and the ground. It was the perfect place to hide, at least for a little while. Lyria stepped off the ship, her eyes scanning the surroundings. The air was crisp, cool, and unfamiliar. It was peaceful here, a far cry from the chaos and destruction she had just left behind. "Welcome to the safe house," Ethan said, offering her a brief but reassuring smile. "This place is as secure as we can make it. You and your daughter will be safe here for now." Lyria nodded, though she still felt uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted, that the Generi were closing in on them even now. "Thank you, Captain," Lyria said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I don't know how to repay you for all you've done." Ethan shook his head. "You don't have to repay us. We're in this together now. If your people are as honorable as you, we'll fight for you, princess, for your daughter." Lyria smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. These humans, with their strange ways and unfamiliar customs, had become her allies. She had feared them at first, but now she saw something in them that she hadn't expected: courage, loyalty, and a willingness to stand up for what was right, no matter the odds. As they entered the safe house, Lyria couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of a future free from the Genari's tyranny. The safe house was small but well-equipped, with food, water, and medical supplies. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to keep them going. Lyria and Lyra were shown to a small room where they could rest and recover from the long journey. As Lyria settled into a chair beside the bed, she looked at her daughter, who was already asleep, her little chest rising and falling peacefully. Lyria felt a deep sense of relief. Lyra was safe, and as long as she had her daughter, she would keep fighting, no matter what it took. She stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the mountains that stretched far into the distance. The world was vast, and yet it felt smaller now. She wasn't alone anymore. She had the humans to thank for that, and in time she would repay them. But for now, there was a new beginning to embrace, a new life, a chance to rebuild. And for the first time in years, Lyria allowed herself to feel the warmth of hope.